Hello everyone, my name is Micah Smith and I am one of the TAs for public speaking, and today I'll be talking about constructing the persuasive speech. In this video, we'll learn about what an argument consists of, we'll discuss how to use convincing evidence and how to use effective lines of reasoning, and we'll learn how to construct a call to action and address counter arguments. So let's go ahead and get started. So what does an argument consist of? And I'm not going to go too in depth with this because I know that there's another video in this folder that discusses this, but let's look at what a claim is. So a claim states the speaker's conclusion about some state of affairs, and it answers the question, what are you trying to prove? So this is essentially going to be the backbone of your argument. And then next we come to the evidence. So evidence is used to help back up or substantiate the claim. It answers the question, what is your proof for the claim? So how are you going to back that up? And then the warrant is used to justify the evidence that supports the claim. The warrant essentially connects the claim and evidence together. I like to think of it kind of as a bridge. At one end of the bridge you have a claim, and at the other end of the bridge you have evidence. And so, according to your textbook, it is a line of reasoning that provides a rationale for accepting that the evidence for the claim is valid or warranted. And so you can kind of derive that from its own word. You're just connecting those two. You're trying to justify the evidence to meet the claim. So now we'll talk about using convincing evidence. So we'll talk first about secondary sources. And so those are considered external sources or anything that you don't gather on your own accord. And so secondary sources include examples, narratives or stories, testimonies, whether that's expert or lay testimony, facts, and statistics. And so secondary sources are used best when you are imparting new information that the audience was not previously aware of. And so that just adds that little extra emphasis onto what you're saying. And so we'll move on to how to offer speaker expertise as evidence. So this will boost your credibility or ethos, as we previously talked about, as well as provide evidence to support your claim. Utilize your own experience or knowledge to expand upon a claim. So it's okay to come from your own perspective whenever you're trying to discuss a claim. So an example of this would be, as a first-generation college student, I understand from firsthand experience the importance that outreach programs can have. So you're using your own knowledge, your own experience, your own life to kind of help your audience visualize for themselves what this claim means to you, and offer evidence that appeals to audience needs and motivations. So sometimes you'll need to make your claim more relevant to your audience by turning to their own needs and motivations. This works best when you're trying to convince your audience to change a behavior or a preconceived idea, or when you're asking your audience to act on your suggestions. So this appealing to needs and motivations. If you're trying to tell your audience that you would like them to do something, you'll need to help them understand that it's going to benefit them as well, or help them meet those motivations. So using effective lines of reasoning. So there are a few different types of warrants. I know that we talked about warrants previously, and then there was another video that discussed warrants. So we'll just go into the different types now. And so there are motivational warrants, or those who offer reasons targeted at the audience's needs and emotions. These are more pathos-centered. And so you're targeting those emotions, you're targeting those needs. And so we have authoritative warrants. So this relies on the audience's beliefs about the credibility of the evidence. And so this is very ethos-centered because you are focusing on credibility and character. And then we also have substantive warrants, which offers reasons targeted at the audience's faith in the speaker's factual evidence as justification for the argument. So this is very logic-centered. Is there a logical connection between the evidence that you're using and the claim that you're trying to support? And so that is very logos-based. And now we'll talk about how to address counter arguments. And so counter arguments are arguments that are on the opposing side of your claim, what you're arguing for. And so let's talk about some facts about arguments. Every argument has a counter argument. There's another side that we're not looking at. And so we have two types of messages whenever we're talking about arguments. So we have one-sided messages, which only offer one side of a claim. And so you're only seeing one side of it, and then we have two-sided messages. So these expand on opposing viewpoints, and then they can be used to refute the opposing points of view. So those two-sided messages, they are used to showcase the other point of view, and they can also be used to refute the opposing viewpoints. So why is it important to even address counter arguments? So you might be asking, isn't it more effective just to focus on the argument that I'm trying to make? And research shows that that's not always the most effective means of argumentation. So whenever you address the counter arguments in a debate or in a persuasive speech, you add credibility to your own argument because you are acknowledging that it's more than just your point of view. It's more than just this point of view that you're presenting to your audience. And so research shows that two-sided messages are more persuasive because it instills a sense of honesty, and then that again adds to that ethos and credibility. And so how do you address counter arguments? So we'll go over some helpful tips to addressing counter arguments, possibly in your persuasive policy speech or your debates. And so let's talk about that. A speaker does not have to address every single counter argument, just the most important ones. You don't want to waste your own time talking about all the counter arguments, because then you're going to spend your whole speech talking about the other side. So don't waste any time trying to come up with and discuss every counter argument. Instead, invest that time into constructing a means of addressing the most important counter arguments. So the most important ones that might be brought up whenever your opposing side is trying to refute your arguments, or the most relevant ones in the context that you're discussing it in. And so recognize the different types of audiences that you're speaking to as well. It's very important to understand the context in which you are speaking in, or the rhetorical situation. And so sometimes you might have a hostile audience, or those who strongly disagree, especially if you're talking about something more controversial or more able to be polarized. And so raise counter arguments that the audience is most likely to disagree with and try to win support. And so if you're arguing against something and you know that there's maybe a more outlandish point of view, or something that's more easily to be disagreed with, you can bring that up and try to win support for that. If you have a critical or conflicted audience, they're kind of on the fence, they're not exactly sure what they know or what they think, and so you can address major counter arguments and refute them and introduce new evidence. So just emphasizing those major counter arguments and making sure that you have the evidence to back up how those can be refuted. And then you have your uninformed or apathetic audience. So maybe they just don't know enough about this topic, or they don't really know why they should care about this topic. You can briefly raise and refute key counter arguments that the audience will probably be prone to remembering or hearing about in the future. And so it'll be important to discuss those key arguments, because if they want to find more information about the topic that you're discussing, then they will see those other arguments and they can remember what you said in conjunction to them. And so just to summarize everything that we learned today, you learned one argument consists of a claim, data, and warrants, how to use convincing evidence, and how to use effective lines of reasoning. And then we also discussed calls to action and how to address counter arguments. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed this lecture.